This week on Who Deserves to be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame podcast, we look at the case for putting the Replacements into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, we look at the case for putting Minneapolis, Minnesota's band The Replacements into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The group have been eligible for the Hall since 2007 and were nominated once in 2014. They were started by members Paul Westerberg, Bob Stinson, Tommy Stinson, and Chris Mars. That lineup was together for most of their original 1979 to 1991 run. Bob Stinson was around until 1986, and then Slim Dunlap replaced him until 1991. Chris Mars left in 1990 and was replaced by Steve Foley for 1 year until the group broke up in 1991. They then got back together again in 2006 for a year, but then broke up again, and then got back together again from 2012 to 2015. As of this recording, 3 of their members have passed away. Bob Stinson passed away in 1995, Steve Foley in 2008, and Slim Dunlap in 2024. They've been eligible for induction since 2007. After the 1991 breakup, Paul put out a few solo albums, including doing the soundtrack for the Cameron Crowe movie Singles, which helped to popularize grunge music at the time. Paul had the hit song Dyslexic Heart on that soundtrack. The group was also banned from Saturday Night Live for life in 1986, as they were notorious for being drunk and chaotic during their live performances, and the SNL gig was no different. Paul was allowed, however, to play his solo stuff on SNL in 1993. With all that said, let us turn on the stats machine and check the group out. To the tail of the tape we go. The Replacements released 7 studio albums, 4 live albums, 7 compilation albums, and 5 EPs. Of those, 7 hit the top 40 on the American music charts, although none of those were studio albums. 3 of their live albums went top 20 on the vinyl charts. 2017's For Sale, live at Maxwell's 1986, hit number 1. 2020's The Complete Incarcerated live went to number 8. And 2022's Unsuitable for Airplay hit number 16 on the charts. 2 compilation albums hit the top 20 on the vinyl charts. 2015's The Twin Tone Years hit number 8, and 2021's The Pleasure's All Yours, Pleased to Meet Me, Outtakes and Alternatives hit number 18. 2 EPs also hit the top 20 on the vinyl charts. 2013's Songs for Slim hit number 13, and the EP simply titled EP that came out in 2015 hit number 9. They also released 16 singles. Of those, 7 hit the top 40 on the various American charts, with 3 of those going top 5. 1991's Where It Began hit number 4, while 1989's I'll Be You and 1990's Merry-Go-Round both hit number 1. As far as awards go, the group received a Grammy Award. Well, sort of. Bob Mehr, who wrote the band's biography, won a Grammy Award for Best Liner Notes for the 2019 box set Dead Man's Pop. 2 of the group's albums have made Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list over the years, Tim and Let It Be, while their song Left of the Dial is on Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Singles of All Time list. Okay. So their original fans found their songs but not their albums, while a new generation found their albums but only on vinyl. So why are we even talking about them getting inducted in the first place? Simple. Because even though their first couple of albums were punk rock, the Replacements started crafting alternative rock albums, starting with album number 3. In fact, they were one of the founding fathers of alternative rock back in the early 1980s. The Replacements were one of those bands who other bands like to talk about as being one of the ones who influenced them. Artists like the Goo Goo Dolls, Wilco, Ryan Adams, the Afghan Whigs, the Gin Blossoms, and Buffalo Tom all felt the Replacements' influence. So what are the arguments for the Replacement to not get into the Hall? Probably the biggest one is that the Hall has always had this problem with certain genres, especially certain rock genres. I've stated it before and I'll state it again. The Hall seems to hate indie rock, progressive rock, the Seattle sound, and alternative rock. It took forever to put Yes and Rush in, and R.E.M. are rightfully in, but while Nirvana and Pearl Jam got in quickly, it took the first Seattle sound group to release an album, better known as Soundgarden, forever to get in, and they were eligible for almost 20 years before they finally got the call in 2025. Same goes for the Replacements. They were the forerunners of one of the biggest rock music genres of the 1990s and are considered one of the biggest snubs for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Don't you think it's time for the Hall to stop putting some of these more questionable artists, quote unquote, in and start putting in artists who the fans care about and who deserve to be in the Hall? It is time for the Hall to stop playing around, get serious about putting quality artists into the Hall, and put the Replacements finally into next year's class for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.